Hello, is anybody out there? Make sure my volume's up high. It is. Good. Oh, we still got 3 minutes.
Hey, Dr. Lamb, is Blackboard down?
It just crashed on me.
Okay.
Same thing. I can't get on.
I got in touch with Bob, the Blackboard man, and he said reboot and switch browsers, and I did that.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get to the server, so yeah, it's down.
That's what I'm getting server unavailable.
Yep.
That's what I keep doing.
I am too. It was just down partially a few minutes ago, and now it's crashed.
Oh boy.
So I switched servers, but that didn't do any good. So we'll just have to struggle on. There's Jennifer and Kelly. There's April, Laura. One, two, three, four, five, six. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All right. 1 minute to go. Let's see. All right, I've got 7 o'clock. How is everybody tonight? Tara must still be at school.
No, we have a school event tonight for our assistant superintendent that's leaving.
Kelly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're celebrating her tonight.
Well, that's very nice of you.
Yes, and so does Dr. Buckwell.
Yeah, she's going to start working for us in the fall.
Yeah, that's what she said. She's like, "Oh, you have class with Dale Lane? Tell him I said hi."
Yep. She just got through her Blackboard, and her and Malia Neal, who's principal over in Lincoln County, they're going to teach 605. But what I'm really going to have them do is sit and revamp our assessment course to gear it toward EVOS, and maybe use EVOS as kind of the core, and then work kind of branch off of it. I mean, if you dig down in the weeds on EVOS, you can teach pretty much everything in assessment with it.
Oh yeah, and that's the role she's moving into. She's going to be.
Well, I mean, that's what she does. That's why I wanted her.
Accountability. Yep.
She has skills.
Yep, for sure. We're gonna miss her.
Yep. So happy for her. Well, welcome everybody. This is our last case study, and as you know, this weekend will be our last weekend. We'll meet 9 o'clock till 4 on Saturday, and then we're going to end at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Will Sarah, that give you time to get back for your obligation if we over at 1?
Yeah, I have to be there by 2:30 so it's like an hour and 15 from
Yeah.
from
So you
Charlotte
have
to Boiling
but
Springs.
y'all just get up and leave at 1 o'clock if I'm still talking. So
Okay.
we're gonna go. As always, we'll do our devotional at 9 o'clock on Sunday. I'll have refreshments, biscuits, some pastries. We'll order lunch out. We'll probably get the same order unless somebody wants to change. We'll order out on Saturday, and I'll just bring a few extra things on Sunday, and we'll power on through on Sunday. All right.
Sounds
So
good.
have a different plan than that? Hearing no objections, we'll move right along. You should be wrapping up your OMA this week and get it in. I've been very pleased with the work. I hope you found some value in the OMA in terms of learning scheduling. Many of you probably already knew scheduling, but hopefully it kind of, the process is what I want you to really learn about scheduling more than just the schedule itself. That there's a lot of stakeholders, federal law, state law, board policy, best practices, EVOS, going through that. That gives you a roadmap as to who should be teaching what, where, and when. And then teachers have a role as well. They're fifth in the input. If you can remember that, you'll be fine. Your last discussion board is due this week. Many of you have already done it. About negligence liability. North Carolina has tort liability, so it can get with you. The only thing that I would suggest is, and most districts don't do this, and I think it's a mistake, is I would encourage your school or your school district to develop a policy to deal with parents and media that show up at accident sites. Whether it's a bus wreck, whether it's a shooting at school, people need coaching, training. They need direction on how to deal with media. A political, I guess maybe a political commentary on the sides. The superintendent and CMS was resigned, terminated, whatever this week over obvious violations of the law. Foremost being the debacle at Butler High School when the shooting occurred. As you found out from your crisis box, which was your first activity, it should be under the front. You should have 3 evacuation plans, 1 on campus, 1 you can walk to, and 1 you can walk to and be picked up. They didn't have any of those things in place. They didn't have the class rosters. They didn't have, it was just everybody, it was just mass confusion because they stopped following up on those things. Stop fingerprinting candidates because the superintendent ignored the board policy. He thought that he was a policy maker, not a policy carrier outer. So that's a really good example of the difference between being an elected official and being professional staff. Even the superintendent is still just professional staff. It's not your job to make policy.
Dr. Lamb,
Yes.
did you say you're supposed to be fingerprinted?
The policy in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools is all new hires have to be fingerprinted. Well, he discontinued that practice last summer because he didn't like what it cost. Ignored the board policy.
But that's not the case in every district. That was just one of their policies.
Policy. But
Okay.
because it's not, his argument was it's not state law, so I shouldn't have to do it. Although it was board policy, he said, well, we just got the cart before. We were going to change that anyway. And the board members said, no, we weren't.
Oh,
We
wow.
weren't going to change that. What do you mean? Where did you get that? He thinks he's a policymaker, or thought he was. He thought that his job was to lead policy.
So what's the $30,000 for the public relations firm? What is that supposed to be doing? Covering
Well,
all that up?
Yes. There is a big difference in being a duly elected official and being professional staff. I don't care how high in the organization you are, you're still professional staff. Your job is to carry out federal law, state law, board policy in that order. And if you don't do those things, you know, people say, you know, that was pretty stiff, him losing it. I thought he was lucky to stay out of prison. It's not over with.
Yeah.
I can tell you, because I think there's a couple of federal laws. I know there's some state laws been violated on some reporting. I know DPI, through a contact of mine, is after CMS now for some money. That you know what happens if you don't give them. You give them data, they give you money, and they give you money, and if you falsify the data or don't give them the data, there's issues. So there's money going to have to change hands with the state. I mean,
Well, they've clearly got the money because they can pay that firm $30,000 to make it look
Right.
good.
$30,000. We used to light cigars off that much money. $30,000 CMS on a $1.6 billion budget's not a lot of money. But I said that correctly. $1.6 billion budget, $30,000. I mean, that's just that. Keep that in a coffee cup sitting on your desk in Charlotte Mecklenburg. That's walking around front pocket money.
Wow.
You don't understand how much money there is there. I didn't understand it until I worked there. I'd worked out in the woods where you know, we had Dixie cups and strings. That was you go to Charlotte Mecklenburg, and you know it's a lot of it's for show though. But $30,000 sounds a lot like a lot in Little Washington. It is, but in Charlotte, that's no money.
That's a beginning teacher's salary here
I know,
with the
but
supplement.
you know, but the thing to remember is he looked at it that way as well. No big deal. $30,000, that's cheap. That's no money. I mean, but see, you've got to understand the difference between professional staff and policymakers. And your job is to execute, and that's what this course is all about. Your job is to execute the laws and policies of the federal, state, and local. That's your job. And if you don't do that, I don't care how high up you get in the organization, you won't survive. And there's also there's tort liability. They can make you pay that money back yourself. If you're negligent, they can make you pay. You do not have the protections of an elected official. You need to understand that. There's a big difference. So that I hate it for him, but it's a good case study for us to look at in terms of, doesn't matter what level you are in the organization, if you disregard law policy, you will not last long. Like dogs chasing cars or pros putting for pars, you will not last long if you don't execute your job legally and ethically. You just won't make it. That brings us to the last case study. This is I don't know if this is my favorite one. It may be, but I will say this. This case study has everything. This case study is everything that you should have learned in this course. It has everything. It has special ed, it has law, it has policy, it has politics, it has instruction, it has instructional supervision, it has assessment, it has best teaching practices, it has delegation. We've talked about that that teachers are delegated the authority to assign grades to kids, but the principal is ultimately responsible. Well, you know, this one it touches every corner of my half and Steve Law's half of this course. It touches it all in this case, and that's why it's last. By the time you get here, you should be able to answer this is a multi-leveled case, but you should be expert enough to answer all the questions in this case when you get here, because this rolls it all together. And so I'm so excited that we have gotten here to this one. And so Kelly, Sarah, Angela, and Shelly, you're up first. I downloaded your presentation today and put it on a drive just in case Blackboard crashed, and it did. So we're good to go. So whenever y'all are ready, just fire away.
Does anybody want to start?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. So our first slide is just the background. So you can see that it's a pre-K elementary school with 300 students, 35 staff members. It's really low income families. So the new principal was elected recently for the position. So that shows that she was chosen. She was, backed by people in the board. The Parent Association is concerned that the students who are in the classes that are high flyers are not being served in the way that the low achieving students are, and they're worried about their students academically. So they've come to Eugenia, and she's gone to Sylvia. She realizes that the parents are actually right, that Sylvia is focusing more of her attention on the lower achieving students, and that she believes that is the best practice to have the higher achieving students co-teach the lower achieving students.
All right, let's stop right there. All right. Is this case relevant? Could this happen in today's public education? Could you have a case where instead of exceptional children parents coming in complaining, could you have a case where regular ed parents came in and complained?
Yes, definitely.
According to Richard Schwartz, the law firm out of Raleigh that does all of the legal work for DPI and the Principals Association, is who puts on the legal seminar. This has become much more prevalent than EC complaints. We've done such a good job as an institution, public education, of informing parents of their rights with the parent handbook and all the things that we do for them, that we don't get a lot of complaints or lawsuits from them. But now it's this basic education push that parents are coming in saying, my child's not getting the basic education because this child's in the room with them, and the professional staff, whether it be the inclusion teacher or the regular teacher, is spending too much time with them and not focusing on my child. And besides that, they have my child teaching other children rather than learning themselves. So this is the most relevant case in exceptional children right now, according to Richard Schwartz. That's why I got this one. This is the most relevant example. You can see this one is from a different part of the world, I guess. But it has become the most relevant thing in terms of inclusion versus mainstreaming, basic public education, rights of the disadvantaged. It has it all. All right, next slide.
All right, so how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers, and is it necessary to choose one approach or the other? So through reading everything, it's clear that with Eugenia's school, there are multiple opinions of how inclusive education should be implemented. And if Eugenia wants her school to be known as that school that looks after the needs of children from those disadvantaged areas and encourages inclusion as a form of education, she needs to share that vision with her teachers and come up with something that is concrete. Rather than having teachers wonder what exactly Eugenia expects, she needs to let them know what her expectations are. Going further, she needs to give an overview of her expectations that can help guide those teachers in the inclusive classrooms. And while there's not one right way to teach inclusion, there are unacceptable practices. Two being that they talked about is having students serve as teachers and to expect the specialists to be the only ones responsible for the inclusive education. Eugenia should start to form expectations around these non-negotiables. For example, all students will receive academic instruction to meet their needs, and the specialists and regular education teachers will share responsibilities for these students as well.
Okay, let's stop there. Let me ask you a couple questions. Do you think that as the principal of the school that Eugenia should have known what Sylvia was doing in his classroom?
Yes.
If she's doing her walkthrough, she should have.
Instructional supervision. Somebody elaborate on that. I mean, what is the expectation for being in classrooms of a public school administrator?
To ensure that learning is happening
But what is the expectation in terms of how often?
every
Let's
day.
start with the basics.
I mean, well, administration should know what's going on in the classroom. Like, what happens in your building, you should be aware.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the first thing that jumped off the page to me is that parents came and complained and she didn't know. How often is she in the rooms? You know, I know I've talked to you about this before, but one of the things that I used when I had to supervise principals, one of the things that I would have to have critical conversations with them about. When you're in public school, you have to call it critical conversations. When you're at a Christian school like Gardner Webb, we call those come to Jesus meetings, about what were you doing that we weren't paying you for that kept you from doing what we were paying you for? Why weren't you in the rooms? I mean, you don't have all your evaluations done. What have you been doing? And they would say, well, I've been busy doing X, Y, and Z. Well, but the X, Y, and Z is not as important as A, B, and C. And I'm an operations person. My hide, H-I-D-E, my hide during the day would be to go to the gym or the cafeteria or be involved with workmen or maintenance men. Instructional people hide in classrooms and don't do the other things. I don't know what Eugenia's hide is, but obviously she's not going to the rooms. That would be, as a principal supervisor, that would be my first concern is how did this get this far down the road and you didn't even know? What's your number one job as a school principal?
Instructional leader.
That's correct, instructional leader. Excellent. Excellent. Instructional leader. I mean, this got out of control because she wasn't exercising her authority, moral and legal authority, to be the instructional leader in that building. That's unacceptable. You might get away with not doing some other things, but this is the thing we hired you for. This is the thing that we hired you for. All right, so that's the first problem. The second problem is delegation. Now, we all know that law is clear in terms of your responsibilities as a principal. You can delegate things to other people, but you cannot delegate the responsibility that go with them. So even when somebody came and complained, what did she do? Did she go and look herself? No.
She called Sylvia in.
She called Sylvia in, but she also sent the technology facilitator to go and look and see what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In this country, if you were to do that, do you think that teacher would have a job action against you for sending somebody else in to do a formal observation of you?
Well, she still doesn't 100% know what's going on in the classroom because she still hasn't gone in there.
If you have a complaint on a teacher about their teaching style or their behavior or whatever, is it legal or ethical to send another faculty member in to evaluate? Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. That person will see your pants off and win. Now, Sarah just got a new job as assistant principal. Sarah, you'll be doing teacher observations. Have you got your bona fides from your school district yet, or did you bring them with you from another school district in terms of doing formal observations?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
Have you gotten has Kannapolis City Schools certified you to do evaluations yet?
Yeah, I was certified in my previous role.
That's right. You brought your bona fides with you, your certificate.
Yeah.
Now, that's why I'm going to use Sarah as an example. See, Sarah is an experienced evaluator. And so when they hired her, they knew that she could start day one and take her load of evaluations. They'll divide them up among the administrative team, and they can take their load. Now, if she had come as an assistant principal, even if she had the title, if she wasn't certified in that district, could she legally do formal observations to teachers? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That the principal set somebody else in there to do a formal observation of this teacher. Oh, you'd be strangled. And, you'd lose I mean, it went from bad to worse. You didn't know what was going on. You didn't go look. You talked to the teacher, and then you sent a peer in to evaluate the teacher. About the only thing left, burn the building down in terms of getting worse here. This is a roadmap for what not to do as an instructional leader. It's almost overblown in terms of how bad this one is. But I've seen them this bad, unfortunately. I really have. Now, the pretty much standard rule of thumb is that, teachers have a certain number of formal observations every year according to where they are in their licensure pattern and their years of experiences. But most districts require a walkthrough in every teacher's room at least once a week so that you know what's going on. Now, the course that y'all missed, the 602 assessment where you have to do the APTEL teacher leadership. We require our master's candidates, they have to do some walkthrough observations using a checklist, using the walkthrough checklist of their district. Because now, a couple of years back, I was talking with Maureen Furr. Maureen's retiring this year. She and I are peers, and we were principals together. And I was over at South Meck, and I was talking with her and said that they had gotten somebody new in I guess the assistant superintendent for curriculum, but they'd gotten this wild hair that they wanted all teachers to have a walkthrough every day. That's a little excessive. I will agree. But I do believe that somebody should be in a teacher's room at least once a week. That's the minimum. You should be in there every week. Obviously, this person never goes. And then she sent somebody else, which is actually a violation of that teacher's rights. That wouldn't go well. So looking at it from an instructional leadership point of view, it's just a disaster. All right, so we'll move on here.
Okay, so then some steps that the principal should take to get things back on track. Number one, determine what her expectations are for providing an inclusive education, and then share that vision with the staff. Provide professional learning. With that key being, she needs to actually communicate that vision through to the staff so that everybody's aware of what she wants to see in the classroom. And then following up on that, so she needs to actually go in and do walkthroughs to make sure that they are in fact following her vision, and then talk to the teachers and find out how it's going. Is her vision actually realistic? Is it working? Or are they able to implement it? And then get into the PLCs and see what support is still needed and like what's actually happening in the school and in the classrooms.
Absolutely. Excellent. One of the other of the 6 that you folks missed is the CAP, cultural advocacy. And in that one, we have teachers we have our interns, our candidates, do interviews with teachers. They do qualitative work. They have to do a whole section of qualitative where they talk to teachers and get feedback from them to get them in the habit of doing that. And what we do is we have them follow up on a survey, teacher working condition survey in North Carolina, the advanced ed survey in South Carolina, on the school leadership part and on the instructional part where they have to follow up. Here are some recommendations we have. What do you think would fix this problem? Get feedback. How is the professional growth plan going? What's the efficacy of our professional development plan? Is it good, bad, and different? You need to get, if you want to know, you ask. I love that. You've got to ask people how it's going. One of the things that I really kind of get miffed about is you're in the same building with these people and you send them a survey monkey survey. Why don't you just go ask them? You know, there's a lot of richness and depth and color to qualitative data that you don't get with quantitative. Me being a quantitative person, but I will freely acknowledge that you don't get the richness of data, from quantitative like you get from qualitative. You've got to talk to these people. I think excellent point there. Very good. I read through this one earlier, and I was so pleased with this slide. Excellent work.
Is one point of view more correct than the other? We said yes, because there's law that supports the inclusive environment. So as a leader, there's one point of view that is more correct than the other. The IDEA law, students should be placed in their least restrictive environment. The inclusive setting should be the first option for students with disabilities. If the inclusion setting does not benefit the student with a disability, then other placements should be investigated or considered. Specialists should come to the students and assist the regular education teacher in a teaching partnership. And that was actually, I know this was in Chile, I think is what I read. But it didn't appear there was a specialist in the room with the teacher, with the regular ed teacher.
No. But there would be, but you're right. That's a problem that we have with the inclusion model now, is the specialists do come to the room, but they just work with teachers, and it's not a partnership. It's almost a distraction to everybody else. It's probably worse than not having anybody. But
I actually have taught inclusion this school year for Foundations of Math 1, and I had an excellent inclusion teacher. He was actually a lateral entry. He was working on his master's in counseling, and he had 3 years to do that. But he was an EC teacher under the lateral entry thing, and a football coach, and just a model. I've been in other situations where the inclusion teacher, I almost would have preferred them just not show up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But this was one of the rare, really good situations.
Good. See, what I love about this case is there's no debate whether you're going to have inclusion or not. And so that's the legal part of it. You as a principal have to carry out that law. But now the question is how are you going to do it? And I love the idea that you as the principal have to set the expectation. And go back. You as the principal, you have to have the expectation. You have to share that. You have to professionally develop that. You have to work with people. You have to be a servant leader there with them in the trenches, working through those things. Because it's not optional whether you do this or not. The law says you have to do it. This is not one of those things, well, that's controversial, we'll quit. You can't do that. You're going to have things in your school as a school leader that you have to do. You don't want to because you know somebody's hanging your head about every other day. You don't want to, but if you don't do it, it's going to be worse. And so that's what I love about this case is, yes, this is controversial, and yeah, you got a bunch of people yelling, screaming they don't like it, but you got to figure out how to work around it. You can't just say, well, we just won't do it anymore. You can't cop out. This one holds your feet to the fire. That's what I love about this case study, and this is you can't just say, well, we'll stop it for a while and we'll go study it or send it to a committee. No, it keeps on going on. You just got to figure out a way to make it work. And I love this slide. Again, I love this slide in terms of your litany of things that you need to do here. I love the way that you have developed that. You've left us a clear scaffold of how we get to from where we are to where we want to be. And that's what you've got to have, a strategic plan that scaffolds us from where we are to where we want to be. Now, I can get up on the roof of this building if I have enough steps. I'm probably not going to be able to get back and get a run and go and jump up on top of it. But if I have enough steps, I can get up to where I need to be. Scaffolding. You folks y'all are expert at that. I'm not. But that's where, that's what you've got to do with your staff. You don't have any option. You can't quit. You can't turn around. You can't say, we'll quit it. You've got to keep going forward, and you've got to figure out a way. There's going to be things like that in your career that you're not going to be, it's going to be local board policy or state policy, or in this case, federal law. You're just going to have to find a way. And the way you do it is scaffolded, just like this. Perfect. Love that.
I have a quick question. We're in a situation this year, we don't have enough EC teachers. I think that's
Yeah.
across the state. But the inclusion, we have a math teacher who is also EC certified, licensed, whatever. So the principal right now is scheduling her with the inclusion, but I'm not sure that he's planning to bring in an inclusion teacher. Like, she's going to be paid out of EC funds, but she's still teaching under the math umbrella.
Uh-huh.
And she may very well be the only one in the room.
Yes.
Legal?
No.
Okay.
But you
I'm
have
not-
to do what you have to do what you have to do. Now, if
Right.
somebody sues you, you're gonna lose your britches.
Right.
Tell you right now. They don't. You can't go to court and say, "Well, we couldn't find anybody, so we broke the law." Nobody can give you permission to break the law. So, no, not legal. And yes, if somebody complains, if enough pressure is put on, they'll find somebody.
So I guess, if he were worried about someone reporting him, and I'm not that person because I just don't want to open Pandora's box right now, but what about bringing in a sub until he finds someone, even though the sub is not certified in either area?
Yeah,
Would that keep-
they can do that. They can do a long-term sub.
And they don't have to be certified in
No, as long as they pay them as a long-term sub. Now, you can't do a day-to-day sub. Long-term
Oh,
long-term sub has to, that will get you by.
Mhm.
mhm.
Has to be a
Unless
long-term
you're trying to
sub.
save money.
Yeah. Yes. Until somebody challenges them, then they'll have to go back and fix it. Now, the actual ethical thing to do is hire somebody on the end of your contract, and they get paid as a long-term sub anyway. People on the end of your contracts get paid as a long-term sub.
What do you mean on the end of the contract?
End
What
of
does
your
that mean?
contract means is if you, after a certain point during the year, there's usually a cutoff period sometime in the first semester. If you're hired after that, you're technically hired on an end of year contract. You can't be hired on a continuing contract. You're only hired to fill in for the rest of the year, with the expectation that you'll get an actual continuing contract at the beginning of the next year. But the thing, if you hire somebody on end of year and they're not certified, you can just pay them as a long-term sub. A lot of districts manipulate around that to save money. And so if you hired a long-term sub, either just, on the end of year or, an ongoing basis. See, when I was a high school principal, I had a long-term sub. He came every day. He showed up every day and we just told him where to go. He was a long-term sub, worked that way for years. Came in every day, just like anybody else. Mr. Palmer.
And if you didn't need him, and I'm sure you probably
I never had a day. I was only there for 5 years. I can't say forever, but in 5 years, I never had a time when he didn't go somewhere to go to work. You got that many people, but the best story about him is he retired as a teacher in California. One of his students was Calvin Broadus. You know who Calvin Broadus is? Snoop Dogg.
Snoop, yeah. Yeah.
He knows Snoop Dogg in Compton.
Wow.
Long time ago, but yeah, that's his story, and he's sticking to it. He actually knew him though. That's true. This boy was big and famous, but he actually knew him. That is true. But yeah, Mr. Palmer came every day, and that way we didn't get caught in a situation like you're talking about. I had somebody to put in when I needed somebody to make sure that I didn't get caught legally short. And we hired regular subs, but I had one I could put wherever I needed on a daily basis. So I never got caught especially on the EC, with not having coverage. Absolutely.
I'm just glad to hear Snoop Dogg is not his real name.
No, it's not his real name.
I have a question about inclusion.
Yes.
At our school, the kids get, well, the teachers who have the inclusion students have an assistant in the room for English and math classes, but not science and social studies. But it's the same kids, so I don't really understand how it's legal to not have someone there for science and social studies in the class with them.
Well, go back to your state testing program. What subjects are state tested for those kids?
Well,
Math, science, and English.
yeah.
And at the high school,
Also, doesn't it also matter as to what is on their IEP?
Well, it
yes,
does. And a lot of times the IEP follows state testing is my point. Sarah's exactly right. What the services they get generally follow and come from their IEP. The IEP, usually that schools will only write in things that have a state test, and especially about the end of course grade, how much it counts and those things. And so a lot of school districts won't write anything in IEP other than just the required stuff.
the IEPs for my inclusion students
Mhm.
don't say that they're inclusion. I would have to dig deeper in CCAS under someone else's login to see whether or not they were inclusion. And I had one student who was inclusion math, but honors English.
Yeah. So you will rarely see untested areas like social studies, things like, you will rarely see that in an inclusion model IEP. Usually they just give them the basic stuff that counts. Now it could be written into their IEP, but rarely is it done that way. Again, back to the basic education deal, I guess. But that's why it's not written in their IEPs, because it's not state tested.
I thought it was because there wasn't a checkbox for it.
Might be, but that's where it comes down to. I mean, what the inclusion model almost has become a shell game. We take it from here and move it to there and see how little we can actually provide. We went to the inclusion model not because we thought it was a better model than we had before, but because it requires 30% less personnel. You know, and the federal government's trying to get out of public education as fast as they can. You realize that.
So you're not under the inclusion model. You legally do, if a child has inclusion as one of their accommodations, there has to be 2 teachers in that room.
No, there doesn't have to be 2 teachers. That's the district's version of it. As long as there's somebody in there to work with that child, it could be a teacher and an assistant.
Okay, that's what I meant. There have to be 2 adults.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, there's supposed to be 2 adults in the room. That is correct. There's supposed to be 2 adults in the room, and one of them is dedicated to keep up with those exceptional children. That is correct. It can't just be you send them in there and they're on their own. No, inclusion model means that they're in the regular classroom, but they do have an adult to support them. That is correct. But now, technically, some districts are trying to get by with teacher assistants, because you get some teacher assistants with federal money for EC, and they're trying to get by with those. I mean, it's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out. What that means is till somebody sues you. You're always trying to do the least you can, try to slide by until you get sued. Then you have to straighten up and fly right. But usually when that happens, somebody loses their job. But that's what districts try. We're trying to, they're strapped for resources, and they're trying to provide the minimum But sometimes they, you know, if the minimum is the maximum, sometimes you don't achieve it. And that's what happens. But
We
some
also
districts are
have-
trying to use teacher assistants. Some are, you know, are doing or trying to make their dollars go further. But in the end, when you get sued, you're going to lose if you don't provide what the law says you're supposed to provide.
And who gets sued? The principal?
That's
School
the whole
system?
point of number 6 and in our discussion boards. They can now sue you personally along with the district. Now, until 1992, they couldn't do that. They could only sue the school board, the county, or the school district. You had protection. Starting in 1992, I was a principal then. Richard Schwartz agency was the person. Every principal in every district in North Carolina was required to go to a legal training. Richard Schwartz put on, because the changeover was in 92 when principals were now could be held legally liable, negligence, tort liability for things you did or didn't do, that you could be sued as an individual. 1992 in North Carolina. That is correct. It came out of a case that happened in Union County.
How far down does it go? I mean, obviously the teacher that is in the room can't be sued because she's not someone whose
Right.
responsibility is the staffing. Does it go down to the assistant principal?
It's according to what the incident is. It can go all the way down to the data manager who entered it in, or who entered it into, who entered the incident in effect. Say if it's an incident, who entered it into, who falsified records by entering it into PowerSchool or into Easy IEP.
That's something I was wondering. Could the teacher get in trouble because the teacher knew it was going on and knew it was not
That is correct.
legit?
You know, if they knew it wasn't legit, they can be sued as well. Whoever entered the data into Easy IEP, if they reported something that wasn't happening, that person, everybody that touches it that's complicit, nobody can give you permission to break the law. And if you're complicit in it, or if you enter into it with them, they'll get you too. We had a situation at one of the high schools in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. We let everybody go from the principal to the data manager. They were all involved in a conspiracy to cover up a crime
Oh my God.
for a star football player.
Oh my God.
Yes.
In our school, we small group test in the same class with the rest of the kids, but just in one corner.
That's
Well,
not separate setting.
No,
that's not a best practice.
Mm-mm.
I'm not sure it's illegal by the definition, legal, illegal. I'm not sure that, but I know what a judge would say to you. They'd wear you out in the open session. They'd make you stand up out in the gallery and just, you know, when they got done with you, you'd think you'd been whipped. I've still got some of them bruises. I used to have to be the one that went and took it for the district. Not fun. But probably not going to, you know, probably not illegal, but definitely not a best practice. It's not something I would want people to know out in open court. You know, there's 2 rules of thumb, you know, kind of for school administrators. Would you want it on the front page of the local paper? Or would you want your mama to know? And part of that front page of the local paper is a lot of small towns, they cover court proceedings. They watch them like people watch soap operas. And if it happened in open court, it'd be on the front page of the paper if the judge thrashed you. So, so those are kind of the rule of thumbs. Would you want your mother to know this, that you did this? And would you want it to be on the front page of the paper? And, you know, if you go to court, it's going to be on the front page of the paper. Could you live with it? So that's one of those things that I would do something different, even though I might not be legally required to. I wouldn't want to have to go to court and defend that. It's just not a good look. You might win the battle, but you'd lose the war of public opinion over that. That's why when we look at these case studies, we have to look at them from the legal part, but also the ethical part, because the ethical part is the part where you get thrashed politically over. You know, the first half of the course, you were looking most exclusively at political cases. You know, this half, we've looked at legal cases. What is the legal precedent? This last case puts the two together, you know, and it raises a lot of these questions about what is legal, but also what is ethical. I don't think it's ethical to test kids in the corner of a room.
I don't either. And I guess that my thought process is someone had to have done research on the benefits of small group in separate setting for children with learning disabilities. So you're not working in best interest of the students when you're just making it convenient for you.
Yeah. All right. All right. All right. As an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ismail, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of the different opinions among the leaders? All right. I'm not a big fan that they involved Ishmael to go and look at the room and monitor or evaluate the teacher. But now that we've got him involved,
So we were talking about how Eugenia obviously chose him because he has relationships with the staff, and it noted that like he was respected by his colleagues.
yes,
So then she needs to tap into that piece of
yes,
strength, and have him actually assist in like that capacity building through the PLCs to help them understand what best practice is, by sharing technology programs that they could use as some of those best practices, which, you know, their curriculum coverage was a concern of theirs. And so they were talking about how they, if he's the technology coordinator, then he should be able to give them some technology to facilitate those concerns. And then
that's
also,
correct.
if he's in those PLCs and he's got those relationships, then he's kind of Eugenia's pulse. So he could let her know what's happening out in schools.
Yeah.
If it's not best practice to have him be the one that is out there doing that, if they respect him, then she needs to use that to her advantage.
Mm-hmm. You know, I like the idea of getting Ishmael involved and maybe using some technology. What do you folks think about having kids teach other kids at in elementary school? Y'all are the instructional expert. I just know it when I see it.
I don't know if you want me to weigh in on that. That's pretty much a passion of mine. That
the slide before this one,
Yeah.
Sarah had put a link to an article that was really interesting and spoke about that.
on slide 5.
Article on using high flyers as
Scroll
peer tutors.
down.
That was a really interesting article. If you get time to read it.
Yeah, I see it. Right there it is.
As an AIT coordinator, all you hear all the time is that the teachers are having the high flyers teach the lower kids. Not only is it not effective as far as academic growth for them, but a lot of people don't realize that those high flyers they're not good teachers for the lower kids. Like, they're really not. They get it so easily and they get so frustrated so quickly that a lot of times it can make a really tense situation. And like, you thought you were doing a good thing by having them teach others, but it just usually ends in disaster.
It's a really, really bad practice.
And I think there's a difference between having your high flyers like assist with helping a student maybe get through the actual like activity, reminding them, oh, you have to make sure you do this stuff, but not teaching it to them. Like maybe monitoring, if you like that's what you're doing and you have large groups and you are trying to monitor the room, and maybe organizing it that way rather than having them go ahead and just teach them what they don't know. But you should be doing at that time.
Yeah.
I use I call them collaborative groups for application exploration, but not for teaching a new concept.
Well, I mean, Robert Marzano, we've had cooperative learning. You know, that was one of the main tenets of the middle school concept. We've had that since the 1960s. Now, instead of calling it cooperative learning, we call it collaborative groups, and everybody does that. And there's some value in that, but having elementary kids teach other kids, that's a really bad idea. I think Sarah hit on something that I truly believe. Kids who are your high flyers get it intuitively. They don't even know how they get it. They just get it. How in the world are they going to teach somebody when they don't even know themselves how they know it? I mean, some of that's just natural, and it does not translate to them. They have no cognition of the learning process, of how they got it or how somebody else could get it. They just, they see it and everybody else doesn't. It's like when you see those pictures, find the monkey in the tree. I'm standing there scratching my head like the monkey. I'm never going to see the monkey in the tree. And my wife pointed out 1,000 times, I'm never going to see the monkey in the tree. I'm colorblind. I'm not going to see the monkey in the tree. That's kind of the way it is with these kids. The high flying kids, they see the monkey in the tree, and they don't know why. I mean, it's just a normal thing. I was an elementary principal for 5 years back in a time when we really got into learning styles and some of these kinds of things, all the done and done stuff, the Johns Hopkins professors that were a husband-wife team, done and done. We actually had them come to the district where I was principal. We did a lot of those kinds of things. And one of the things that they really wanted to do was have kids teach other kids. And it was brutally bad. It was brutally bad. We know how hard it is as teachers to teach kids. And we're trained professionals. And then we're gonna get a bunch of 10-year-old kids and have them teach. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of, I'm like Sarah, that's one of my pet peeves. I think even peer review at your level, we do peer reviewing the evidences that you did. We have our master's students peer review one another's work. We give them a rubric to do it in, but we only use that in a very limited capacity, even at the master's level. Because I just can't, I don't read anything good about that. I don't see a lot of, that you get a lot out of it. The reason we have them do it early on is it teaches them the rubrics. It teaches them how to follow a rubric. And so for us, the peer reviewing is not so much the person who gets the review on their work. That's not really the value. The value is the person themselves learning to follow a rubric when doing a review. That's really important for administrators to be able to follow a grading rubric, because that's the heart of the evaluation system. It's being able to follow a rubric. And so that's what we do that for. I don't know that we get any value at all for the person whose paper gets reviewed, but it's just the teaching of the review to the person who's doing the review. The research that I read says it's not of much value.
Dr. Lamb, I have a question. Do you think that you said earlier that the most relevant example right now in terms of inclusion versus mainstreaming is this, where regular ed parents are complaining more?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's because regular ed parents know that there are other options more out there now as far as having access to charter schools?
Yes.
Do you think that's why they're
Yes.
finding their voices more?
Yes. They've got options now. In the past, they had to shut up and stay at home because they couldn't afford to send them to private school. But now there's some options, and and it's emboldened them to come. That and our national discourse now that, for example, you can, as long as you say I'm not a racist, you can say the most racist and bigoted thing that I've ever heard. Just frightens me. And so people have become emboldened now that they come in and say, I'm not discriminating against these poor handicapped children, disadvantaged handicapped children, but I want more for mine. They don't have a problem. 10 years ago, people were ashamed to do that. people were ashamed to do that, that they would know if you came in and said that you really were discriminating. But now, as long as you qualify it by, I'm not discriminating against them, or I'm not a bigot, or, I'm not a racist, you can say the most bigoted, racist, discriminatory things you want to. And that's now accepted in our discourse. We no longer have polite discourse in this country. As long as we say, with all due respect, you're an idiot, that's fine. And that's part of it too, is parents are emboldened now by the national discourse, that people used to worry about what people thought of them, but now you're kind of giving a free pass as long as you clarify it with, a lie to start with. I'm not this or I'm not that. Well, of course you're this or that. But, I guess that salves their conscience. And so, but yes, you're exactly right, because they have choices. I think they wouldn't come in and yell and scream so much, even with the national discourse, if they didn't have other options. And so it's kind of like blackmail now. You get a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
In days of old, all there were for pay schools, and people didn't have money. Kind of had to live with whatever they got. And so this is, kind of a payback. Many of these people felt like they didn't get what they should have in public school to begin with, and so, this is their way of getting back in many ways. All right, slide number 8. What actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question in order to learn and share the achievements and experience they've observed among the children?
So overall, Eugenia needs to take time to think about what the parents are concerned about, and then what her beliefs are and what her expectations are for the school, and kind of come to a consensus on what her path for the school is going to be. If she goes into a situation with these parents with a hostile attitude, the result will not be good. She has to be open and be willing to consider what they're saying, and, try to find the best route for everybody. And then we had some really good things on here for her to consider, just to kind of, ease things over and get some more information, and definitely so the parents feel like she's hearing their concerns. Parent conferences, parent information forms, so things about tell me about your child, so they can complete it so the teachers have some more information and the school has some more information. Just surveys to assess how the community feels about the school, and if they feel like there are things that are really great that are being done, and maybe things that they are concerned about. And then a newsletter to highlight what is being learned in the room, as well as to highlight the successes of all the students. And to kind of build up that transparency where they're sharing things with the parents, so they know what is going on in their child's classroom.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, but here's my question. What is the probability that Sylvia is going to be able to deal with these parents without being angry and lashing out at them? What's the probability?
Probably 5%.
That may be a little optimistic.
Yeah, you're right.
My analogy was it's going to be the same probability as my hair growing back. It's possible. It's just not possible. See, herein lies your problem. What you have on this slide is absolutely what you should have on this slide. But you and I both know she was angry at the principal when the principal said something to her about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she has she has the certainty of the stupid, as I call it, where you're not going to dissuade her from her notion that she has, with no evidence or data to back it up, that the best way kids learn is to teach other kids. That's one of her foundational beliefs. She has no data to back that up other than anecdotal, what she believes. All the research says exactly the opposite. So she's already entrenched in her position, which is not borne out by professional research and data. So she's already feels under siege that the world's against her because they don't see what she sees. It's going to go really bad. You got to do it, though. I'm just going to tell you right now. This is what you got to do. You got to attempt this, but it's going to go bad. It's going to go historically bad. when she gets in the room with these parents, oh, it's going to go bad. So what are you going to do to mitigate that? Because that's going to be a whole nother problem. You know, what she's going to end up doing is, you know, is telling parents that their kids are idiots and it's hereditary. That's exactly what's going to happen. And then how you going to overcome that? So that you better plan for that now. So that's exactly what's going to happen. It's only going to get worse. The name calling is going to start. So what could you do within the confines of your plan here, which is an excellent plan? What could you do to kind of mitigate some of that conflict it's already there? Parents are already mad. Teachers are already mad. Everybody's walking around, you know, mad. How are we going to mitigate that to begin with? So
I mean,
that
I
we
would
can
say
put this plan in place.
as the principal, you need to get into those meetings too, and you need to be there because there's got to be somebody in there who's going to be calm and rational. And so
Somebody's got to go in and set the ground rules, right?
Right.
Angela's absolutely right.
So if that's what you have to do as the principal to solve the problem, then you need you need to make that your priority in your scheduling and be in there to be the voice of reason and maintain a productive conversation.
That's exactly right. You can make this plan work, but only, as I said, you can make this plan work, and I mean the proverbial you, the principal, can make this plan work, but you have to be integral to the plan. You can't just say, all right, y'all go to the room and work it out. That's kind of how you got in this trouble to begin with. The teacher just went to the room and you didn't bother to go see what was going on. Now you're going to exacerbate that by putting two combative parties together and you not be there. That's not going to go well. And so your plan is absolutely what you need to do, but you need to be the one running this plan. You can't just dump it on the teacher. You shouldn't dump it on an assistant principal or your instructional facilitator. I think instructional facilitators are the worst job in school business now. I think they get every dirty job the administration doesn't want to do. Only thing I can think of be worse than BIF would be a dean of students in Charlotte Mecklenburg. So every irate parent, every dirty job that comes along, they dump them on those people, and then they wonder why the problems never go away. They just recycle over and over and over again. The people want to see the principal. You're going to have to go in and deal with this.
Yeah.
Whether you want to or not, it's going to come to your door. You might as well get in front of it and be the person leading it rather than the person who's reacting to it.
Yeah. Be proactive.
Yes. And so, this is not going to go well here unless the principal takes the lead on this. Now, the chances of that, or the probability, is low because if the principal had been a proactive person, they'd been in the room to begin with. So, we hold some truths to be self-evident. I mean, this principal is obviously not a proactive person, but that's the only way that you're going to get out of this. And that's kind of my summation here on this case is the only way you're going to get out of this as a principal is you're going to have to own this one, and you're going to have to work yourself, your school, your teacher out of this one. It's going to be on you. It's going to be on you. Now you got yourself in it by not owning it, by delegating to somebody else your responsibility. And now you're going to have to own it. Now you're going to have to take the whipping. And that's one of the case studies that you did with Steve. Sometimes you just have to take your whipping.
Yeah.
And that's, this case study hits everything that we've covered this semester. Law, policy, good administrative practice, bad practice, best practices. Everything is rolled into this one. But in the end, it all comes back to the leader in the building. You can fix this problem, but only you can fix this problem. It's up to you. You are it. The success or failure of most schools is based on the principal. and your willingness, you don't have to be great. You just have to be willing. You have to be a willing participant. You have to be present. You have to be accounted for. You have to be proactive. You have to be a servant leader. You have to be you have to be there. You can't be just transactional. My name's on the door, so, that makes me in charge. Well, no. The actions that you take make you in charge or make you the leader. You need to be a servant leader. So it's a lesson for us all. Yeah. All right. Do we have another presentation for the evening?
Nope, this one was good. You nailed it. I do have one question.
Okay.
When you said that there's a policy about the frequency of an administrator going through the building and what the expectations are, and that it's by district, is this something we should be able to see, locate, or find?
No, I'm sorry. I missed that.
Okay. You said that there's a policy about weekly walkthroughs or the amount.
Oh,
of
yeah.
time.
Your it may not be published, but there is board policy and administrative policy in every district. Sometimes they don't put the administrative policy online. They do put all board policies online. When you become an administrator, you have access to administrative policy. When I first went to Charlotte-Mecklenburg, I liked how they did it. They did it in notebooks back in the day. It was not stone tablets. I'm not that old, but they did it in notebooks. And they had a blue one. The paper was blue, and then they had one and the paper was yellow. So we weren't really smart people. So we could immediately know that the blue one was the board policy and the yellow one was administrative policy. The interpretation of, one interprets the other. Here's the board policy and here's the administrative interpretation. Just like DPI, we talked last week. DPI interprets the General Assembly laws and the State Board of Education policy, and they write those manuals that we've looked at. Well, in your district, the board sets policy in your district, and then the superintendent staff, the professional staff, interprets that policy and says, this is what it means day to day. Like how many minutes of math you should have, or how many minutes of reading, or duty-free or planning time on the daily schedule, or how many walkthroughs. That's all administrative policy. Now, some districts do publish that, or it is online. And some of them, it's only in the administrator's portal.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to ask in your district. But remember, at the local district level, there's board policy and there's administrative policy that interprets the board policy. This is what we're going to do to meet that board policy. And so, yes, it will be, every district has a policy or got what they, or maybe they may call them guidelines in terms of what the expectation is for walkthroughs. Everybody knows there's a legal requirement for formal observation. DPI sets those licensure standards, but the district sets the walkthroughs. Now, the state says you have to do them, but the district says how often and how many. Yes, that is correct.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. More questions, more input. Hope everybody got to have the input tonight. If you want me to bring the other presentation up. But excellent job. I mean, this is a difficult one. There's so many different facets, but you folks, you hit them all. But the problem that you get into as a school administrator is rarely do you have things that come to you that are just a single layer. Usually it's multiple layers like this one, where you've got to bring everything that you know in and put it all together. But at the core of it is law. And that's kind of in the benediction tonight, is the core of it is always law. I think ethical concern and then political outside of that. I go legal, ethical, political is my personal litany. I don't think you can get away from the core of the law. You must You must follow the law and policy, obviously, that accompanies that. And then the ethical concern of doing the right thing, and then the political part of it has to come third in that trilogy. Now, I know administrators, and you do too, that reverse that. The political always comes first. The ethical and legal way in the back. They operate under that famous administrative axiom: me first, then you. But we want you, I want you, to be a legal, ethical leader, because if you do that, kids will get much better. They will be served much better than those folks who are only in it for the political and out for themselves. If you do the legal and the ethical, children will be served, and that's our core competency. That's what we do. Is we teach and we serve kids. We make their lives. It is the first steps to the American dream. It's how you better yourself in this country. Public education was originally provided for in the preamble of the Constitution as states may provide it, and it was for common people. We had private education in this country long before we had a country. Long before our Constitution, we had private education. About 100 years. Harvard, 1600s. We had private education for the wealthy and the landowner and the gentry in this country. Public education should serve everybody, from the wealthiest child to the poorest child. That's our role. But it's more relevant today than ever before. It is the first steps to the American dream of making a life for yourself and bettering yourself in this country. So it's a big responsibility. It's the most important job we have in our country, is making sure that our kids are well educated. And folks who are only looking out for themselves or to feather their own nest that are in leadership roles, I don't believe that they can do that and serve children well. I just don't. Maybe I just don't know enough. Well, of course, I know I don't know enough, but I just, from my experiences and from what I have seen and from data, people who operate in political realm only, kids usually suffer. That's how you have lead in the water in Flint, unfortunately. So, as an exemplar. Anything else for the good of the group tonight? I'm looking forward to this weekend. Y'all got to talk more when we're live. Y'all got to let me talk less and y'all talk more. All right. I'll see y'all Saturday morning. I'll be there a little after 8. Get set up for breakfast. Any special requests for breakfast, just email me. I'll see you Saturday.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.